the hand.
The woody numbering.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Just want to reiterate to everyone, this is an open workshop. It is being live streamed. The purpose of the workshop today is to walk through the papers that will come to you next week. And obviously to go through this document in a bit more detail to make sure that you're happy with the look and feel and content. This is not a relitigation of any decisions that have already been made. But there may be a couple of tweaks that we need to make to policies, so we'll come to that as we go. So just to give you an outline of the agenda, we have got refresh delegation registers and financial delegations report coming to you, because following the realignment and the change to job titles, I now need to change all of those titles. So I've taken the opportunity to reframe the financial delegations in a slightly different way. So that will come to you first. Following on from that, we will adopt a new treasury and liability management policy, reflecting your decision to go with the option to only fund when you need to. So that's required a reset of those covenant levels, because they have to line up now with the LGFA ones. That's being prepared for us by Bancorp Treasury Services, so they are now supporting us in the treasury space. We will then look at the rating policies, and Charlie's going to walk you through those. We will look at adopting the revenue and financing policy, which we have to adopt before you can adopt the plan. And that's your method for what are you going to collect and how you're going to collect it, and what funds your operations and capital. So that's all in there. Then we would adopt the document that we decide on with any tweaks that you've got today. And then once you've done that, we've set the rates. So that's the last part of the puzzle, but we have to do them in that order. So if anyone's got any ideas about can we move that one forward because I'm going to leave, the answer will be no. We have a very procedural process to go through for this. So I will hand over to Charlie and let her start the day with a quick discussion.
So it has been a while since you've seen these rating policies. I think the last time you actually were presented with them was back in November, when we did the deliberations of those policies. So I'll just run you through. There has been a couple of minor amendments. So in the remission and postponement of rates on Maori freehold land policy, our legal reviewer pointed out that we'd missed one of the criteria on that's required by the Act. So I've just inserted that criteria into the policy. Otherwise, it has remained as is, and we've been advised is compliant with the legislation. So that one is much of a muchness. With the remission of rates policy, you'll remember that we are going to, in the rating, take all our fixed charges to SUIPs, SUIPs, separately used and inhabitable parts of units. So one, probably, I don't know what to call it,
A recommendation.
A recommendation is that we notice that where you have, for example, multiple SUIPs on a property that's connected to water and wastewater, you're obviously each going to be charged a water and wastewater rate. However, some of those SUIPs may not actually have the water and wastewater connected to it. So an example might be a shop and a house on a rating unit. The house has got the water and wastewater connected, but the shop has nothing, doesn't have any connection to it at all. It would be unfair to rate that shop an extra wastewater connection. So we have proposed putting in an additional clause, an additional revision for that situation. So I'll just hand over. So the purpose of that is to provide relief to ratepayers where more than one SUIP on a property, but one or more of those SERPs are not connected to the water and wastewater. And it's just those water and wastewater charges. We're not proposing removing the UAGC or running rate, obviously. It's because they're still receiving those things. It's the water and wastewater that they're not connected to. And the conditions are just that there's more than one SERP and that they're connected to the water and wastewater and one of those. So it just outlines the situation. And then the remission is on the unconnected SERP. If they've got 3 houses and a shop, they'd still be paying 3 SERPs for water and wastewater, but not on the shop that's not connected.
Does that solve other issues that we're talking about earlier? Or is that still to come in?
No, I think that's a separate
That's-
issue. So if you want to raise that, now
Yeah.
would be the time.
Yeah.
Want to raise that now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's raise that now.
So I believe councillor Bosley at least has been getting some feedback through related to the annual plan consultation feedback from business owners who live on site, specifically retailers. Who also have a home on site, and the fact that those additional SERPs for the shop and home are going to cause a significant rates increase for them. A proposed solution for that would be to add a similar remission, and you could have criteria around it. So your purpose would be to provide relief for retail property owners. So where the land use is classified as retail. And that the owner or operator lives on site with so that would exclude if you had a shop and a flat is rented out on commercial tenancy. You wouldn't want that to be remitted.
No.
That's not the situation that we're hearing back from. It's where the owner or operator lives on site with the retail business. So you would have that as your criteria, and the remission would be on the additional SERP for. So they'd still be paying one.
But that seems to be more in line with the other conversations we've had around SERPs, where there's where it doesn't apply to dependent family members. So it seems to me that kind of if the use of the 2 or more are personal, kind of, then it doesn't apply. And so to my mind, doing that for an owner operator on site sits very nicely in against that dependent family member kind of all in one family use. But like you say, if that flat or is commercially rented, then a totally different situation. That doesn't apply, but at that owner operator
To be operated through administered through the same situation, the owner would be able to apply for the remission and declare that they are living on site with their retail business, and that would be a remission approved by myself. So,
Charlie, how do you, the last time we spoke, I suppose the dairy is the quintessential example of this. And last time we spoke about this, you said that they would have to make statutory declarations. Is that still the process they're going to have to follow? Because without even thinking, I can think of probably half a dozen that apply in Greytown without even giving it any without even thinking.
So we asked around other councils, and not all of them require statutory declarations. It depends on how well you trust your ratepayers. There is it was made clear on the remission form that we have currently for the family members that they are responsible for making a true and fair information in that form. Yeah. So it's one step back from a statutory declaration, but the onus is still on the property owner to declare that information correctly. And it also says on the form that, for example, if your mother-in-law moves out and you then rent the property commercially, you have to tell us. Same thing, if the owner decided not to live behind their shop and rent it out, they would have to tell us.
Or they sold it in the circumstances.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are you ready with that? Be okay with it? Still not overly ideal about the whole situation, because when we talk about all this way back, it's sort of blown out of proportion. It's almost like we haven't been listened to, but anyway. The other issue I've got is I've also got rural people that are worried that if they have a couple of extra farmhouses, they're going to get charged as well. Is that the case or not?
They would, if they're separately able to be inhabited, yes, they would.
So how do we conclude if they're actually empty or used or not used or?
If they are not inhabitable, that is the property owner's responsibility to talk to QB about how their nature of improvements is classified. We have had a few. I've been listening to talks this week with Kirsty on the phone, and she is helping pointing them to the right place. That process of changing your improvements is not dependent on the 3-yearly revaluation. If your information there just needs updating, that can be done at any time through the QV website or by calling them. I'm assuming that they would probably want some kind of confirmation of the fact that your barn is now uninhabitable, your barn conversion or your farmhouse or whatever is not inhabitable anymore, or even would have some where that flat is gone. It's no longer there, but because a lot of the checking of revaluations is done from satellite information, that obviously.
I think I'm more concerned about the farmers that now don't have quite so many staff, and they might have a habitable house, but no one actually lives in it.
This is mainly water anyway, right?
It's water and wastewater.
So if the farmhouse is not connected to wastewater mains, then there'd be no.
But there's sort of extra roading and that too, or not?
Extra
That's
road
not a
and an
contribution,
extra
yeah.
but we're talking 423 for AGC and 177-ish for the roading charge. So you're looking at about $600 per extra unit if you're not connected to any of the services. Yeah.
When you're not using it, it's still a lot of money.
That's still a lot of money for a farm that's already paying $34,000 in rates.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? Because then you've got rental properties in town that might be empty. And
This is the other concern I've had, that people are concerned that the consultation was nowhere near fair and just for going to the sewer. So I'm a little bit worried that certain people might put litigation against it.
Well, why would they, what would their justification be for claiming that? Because after all, people came and submitted on that topic.
Yeah.
So obviously people were aware of it, and we had quite a few submissions.
But being aware in the legal definition of actually that everyone clearly understands is two different things.
Well,
I think you just need to step back from that. You have consulted on it. We had submissions on it. You have deliberated on it and you decided to go ahead. Your rates therefore are legal in terms of the process that you followed. You might not be happy with the process, but you have followed the process. So
at the end of the day, it has to meet the fair and reasonable test, and there's a great degree of deliberation gone into this.
I mean, I wasn't here for the early conversations.
Yeah, no.
Around this.
But
On soups is not unusual.
Yeah.
I think that to my mind, and there's plenty of people who will correct me if I'm wrong, but to my mind, the justification or the desire, for want of a better word, for the suit was to capture those situations that had more than one house that was being commercially used. And I think with the direction we're going with the remissions, we're in a situation where for the most part, that's exactly what we've done. We've excluded dependent children or family members. We're now set up so that if a person is using both SOAPs on their one property, that doesn't affect them, which pushes this situation for the most part into the kind of commercial rentable use that we wanted to capture, unless and I mean, this isn't a re-litigation, but unless we've suddenly decided that actually we didn't want to capture commercial use of properties, then we've kind of ended up where we intended.
Your reasoning wasn't necessarily about the commercial aspect. It was about the number of users.
Yeah, commercial might be the wrong,
Yeah.
wrong commercial, not commercial as in commercial properties, but as in rented and earning an income.
My understanding was we were trying to target the unhosted places, not the.
No,
No, that's a
not the
different
economic
rate.
development rate. This is the
That's
fixed
Yeah.
charge per, and it's the per is the what you moved away from rating unit to per use. And it will capture developments where you've got multiple properties, multiple
Like the orchards,
houses.
like the orchards.
Orchards is a good
like
example.
retirement villages, like shops where you've got 3 shops on one rating unit.
Yep.
How is that fair to the business next door who's got 1 shop on one rating unit, who's doing it tough? And then the next door rating units gets to split that between 3 shops.
3 shops, yeah.
That was your reasoning when you
Make it
developed
more equitable, right?
the SERPs.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that Charlie, what you've just said there sort of goes against the reasonable part for me, for the rural people where, you know, you've got farms who used to have maybe 3 or 4 stockmen on their farm with them. As we've developed over the years, farming methodologies or profitability of farming has changed so that they don't have so many shepherds and so on. But now they're going to be stung because they've got an empty house on the property. It may still be perfectly serviceable, but the farming themselves doesn't employ those people. So the house is largely redundant. And that's where I've got the slight problem, you know, that they're going to get stung by improving their business practices.
Yep, fully with you there, Alison.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the contrary view is that if I go to Europe for 6 months and leave my property vacant, nobody's about to turn up and say it's not fair that poor Martin's having his rate, still has his rates to pay. You know, there's a building there that gets services that are provided by the community as a whole. Now, whether somebody chooses at a particular point to use that service or not is a slightly separate thing. And the vacant farmhouse, for example, could actually be part of an agro-tourism business, almost certainly. I mean, if you take it to a sort of an illogical extreme, you get the position where we've had some communication recently about a proposed 200 section subdevelopment. Let's imagine that subdeveloper decides to leave it all as one section and just put 200 houses on it and come to some leasehold arrangement with people. Is it fair that they only pay one rate to everybody else, you know, in vaguely similar positions? And
I think
we're ever going to be a perfect situation. But obviously we make broadly general rules. We try to make exceptions for, shall we say, predictable things that we did not intend to, shall we say, gather rates for. But I think a perfectly serviceable house that could be used doesn't make you come into that category.
It's a little bit different, Martin. And you, for instance, going on holiday to Italy for 6 months, that's your choice. These farmers have been pushed by basically the change in style of farming and economics to the point where they don't need the houses, but they're on their property.
Yeah.
But are those houses suitable for commercial rent? So not, and I mean commercial as in an outside person paying to live there, not commercial as in.
The problem you've got is
I would suggest
how many
to you.
people want to live at White Rock and travel to town every day. You know, it's not like a nice house in town where you're going to get someone to rent it in 5 minutes out there, you know. 10 years, you might find someone who wants to.
Well, actually, the problem is at White Rock, there's a horse riding business that does rent out these sort of houses that you're talking about.
And you can target those ones.
And the obvious solution for this person is they put the house on a truck and move it into some other part where it gets used.
That costs a lot of money too, Martin. Some places
You sell it, you make money.
Some of those roads out there, you can't move those houses; they're too big.
I would suggest,
There must be some remission thing or
Get
something.
lost in the weeds here.
Yeah, there's always going to be outliers, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of choice in that. If we obviously set up a rating policy that looks at.
But if you can have a remission for someone in town, why can't you have it for someone out of town? But if they're not using the house,
So the remission would be
if the house isn't being
inhabited by a farm worker or
by
by
anybody, if
being let out
if it's left empty,
commercial gain.
well, if it's left empty, can they get a remission like the ones in town can for certain things?
Well, the ones in town can't get a remission because it's empty.
I would suggest to you
Shops, they have
that the properties that are inhabitable out in the rural area are already inhabited. Farmers are doing things already and making decisions to maximize whatever they can on their properties. Now, if you've got a farm out to I don't know, in the middle of nowhere, that and there's plenty of examples of this around the country where there is no market for them. And Martin, I think your example was a bit far-fetched about you going on a holiday, but you're right in terms of farmers that are doing businesses like horse trekking or the Torah walk or those sorts of things. Those people will be captured by this, but there are still farmers out there in the middle of nowhere, sort of halfway between here and Torah, where there is no tourism, there is no trekking, and there is no nothing. But because of circumstances, they no longer have shepherds. And those houses, what you're suggesting then is either they pick it up on a truck or burn it. Either way, it's a ridiculous solution. They should be able to make an exception and say, actually, that house has been there 100 years, but we don't use it anymore, but it's still there.
I quite agree. If it's uninhabitable, then that needs to be classified as such.
It may still be habitable, but it's just not habitated.
Yeah.
So a similar remission to one we've just discussed with the retail operator with living on site. And that would include this empty/uninhabitable. You could have the purpose being to provide relief for those situations. And the criteria would be farms, so the land use categories that come within farming that are where the secondary buildings are uninhabitable or unused. And if you wanted to match that retail example, you could even have or occupied by farm workers essential to the operation of the business.
Yeah, that feels good.
That does feel good.
Now, I've just had a very quick look at how many we're talking about here. It isn't a very common situation. So we're not going to be drastically reducing the number of SIPs of rates that we're getting. Indeed, out of the 1,000 properties, 1,200 properties with additional SIPs on, the average number of SIPs is 2.5.
Right.
So most of those SIPs have got an extra 1 or 2 additional properties.
And
we've already taken out some for family members, some for retail operators living on site. To do so with farming land use categories would be not a huge impact on that.
Does the integrity of the intention of introducing SOAP still remain?
Yes, I think it does. And in fact, that situation would be, as we discussed, this is very similar to the retail. You're talking about uninhabited
or personal
workers who are essential for the operation.
And those farms are already paying a little bit more because we've gone to capital value. So that is included in their capital value, which puts the rate up anyway.
Yeah. And it's not going to make a huge impact because, as we've said, not many of those farms will be connected to water and wastewater, so it's not going to take many of those charges out. It's mostly the UAGC and the grading charge that will be reduced, so the additional one there. So if I'm hearing guidance that is desired.
Thank you.
And we
will put these as independent resolutions, and then you will debate them on the day, when they will either pass or fail in the room.
And the day being next Wednesday.
Yes, on the 26th.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But assuming Mr. Taylor was happy with that.
Yeah, well, it's guidance and like
Absolutely.
debate and pass or fail on the day, but
Yep.
and there's only limited.
Yes. introduce new rates resolutions then. Depending on the outcome.
Why would you need 3 rates recognition?
The number of rates.
Talk about this.
There's an amendment there, right?
Yeah, so 2 additional amendments to the the remission of rates policy. We will debate and vote on next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And those amendments need to be raised by councillor.
No, we'll put them in.
That would be part of
They're in the report.
Reports will go live on Friday. We've been through this document and made any changes that we need to make. And the agenda will go live hopefully on Friday for next Wednesday. And they will.
All would share his water with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, please, thanks, Russell.
then we get to the revenue and financing policy. So what we rate on, how we fund our activities. The only changes that were made to these was to remove the economic development rate this year. I have left how that activity is funded as a range to make it easier for us to re-implement that rate in the future, should you choose to do so. So the economic development activity will be funded from between 0 and 80% by the targeted rate. So in this year coming, it's 0. And 0 to 20% by general. No, sorry, 20 to 100% by general rate, the other way around. So in this case, this year coming, it's 100% funded from general rates, which is the fallback to the position of if you don't have a targeted rate paying for something, naturally, and no fees and charges, then naturally it's funded by the general rates. And then I took out the differentials for roading and infrastructure for the exotic forestry, because again, we decided that we would do that in conjunction with the other 2 councils in the district. So that's the changes to the revenue and financing policy. Does anyone have anything to ask? In that we've spent 2 years developing that one, so I'm hoping we're.
So the economic development segment within the financing policy is it's effectively it's the same. Sorry, I captured your explanation in terms of 0 to 100 or 0 to 80%. So there's provision to reintroduce if we decide, if the council decide in the future to reintroduce that as a targeted rate. We don't have to go through a change to our revenue.
You don't have to go through a change to your funding needs analysis, which was the very first part of where you decided 20% targeted general, whatever, your percentages of each activity. You wouldn't have to relitigate that funding needs analysis. You can just implement an economic development rate to take care of that targeted rate.
You would have to consider that.
Yes.
We'd have to consider, absolutely,
Yeah, its purpose and its definitions. And,
given we're doing an LTP, we've got to consult them.
Yes, so that would form part of the
wouldn't need to do it
LTP
separate,
consultation. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, depending on the timing of the other 2 councils, you could probably do the differentials as well.
Yeah, if we're doing that.
That's through the LTP consultation. Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone have any other questions?
The elephant in the room was probably the first item.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, didn't envisage these situations when you decided that the only remission was going to be to dependent families, and it's good that you've listened and amended that policy accordingly. So yes. Proposed.
Yeah, well,
it's between
yeah, that'll come before council or something.
Okay, if you're happy, we will move on to the document itself. Do you want to take the reins on this, Alex, or?
Yep. Yeah, the first part, definitely. Appreciate it doesn't look pretty for next week. It'll be a lot clearer. It'll have page numbers, Woody, I promise.
There'll be pages.
Page numbers. Next week, it'll still be in Word form. It will be designed alongside the consultation look and feel. But we have structured and formatted it similar to the last two annual plans, which kind of guides what we'll go through today. Still opportunity to amend, but this is the bones of it. SLT and the managers have been through it, all of their significant activities. So I guess it just depends how you want to go through it today. I don't know how many of you have read it yet, whether we want to sit and read or whether there's already some feedback as we go through. Any preference there?
I think previously when we've looked at documents, it's worked quite well to just go through it and comment as we go.
Reading it, yep.
To absorb, obviously, yeah. With no pages.
Some headings.
We've found we're very attached to page numbers. New revelation.
Can I just make an observation, because obviously this goes out to our community and they try and absorb as much as they possibly can. We often condense these things down with a 1-pager or a 2-pager. Are we doing that with this? So we only do that with a long
A summary.
summary, yeah. Because the body of the document is thorough, and it's a lot of reading if you've got nothing better to do in your day, I have to say. But the graphs, everything's illustrated really well, and it does give the detail that our communities expect to be provided to them. Often we have a summary paper, for instance, that does carry through just the
pages right at the beginning. We've done that.
And I'm wondering whether or not we would consider.
We do that for the annual report. We do a summary. Yes.
Legally, you have to.
For annual report, but do we not do one for annual plan and long-term plan?
No.
What would be in that summary? Because this is obviously like a thorough document.
Oh, this is a meaty document,
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the highlights, I guess, that are within the body of the document.
Spends and all that sort of.
Yeah, because a lot of people will look at this and say, no, I mean, and I'm only talking from my perspective, but if I wasn't involved in council, would I seriously read through the document in detail to get a picture of where council sits? Whereas a summary will give an indication of where financially the council is, some of the changes that have been made in terms of capital land value rating, some of those little things, just to highlight those on the
Would that be
as a summary.
Would that be misleading though, without all the surrounding information, like around a 1-line statement around, say, town funding, could be misleading in terms of without all that information wraps around that. Becomes
it is
people
potentially dangerous.
they read the headline.
Summarize it to a 3.
It needs to be taken out of context.
Yeah.
On the whole of the rest of the document, if you do that with this. I mean, your consultation document is your discussion with the community about the key things.
Yeah.
You've already had that.
Yep.
This is just saying, these are the things we talked to you about. This is the feedback we got.
Yep.
These are the decisions that have been made. Here's the plan. I don't know how we would distill that down to a summary document or a 1-pager that actually communicated effectively with the community about where we landed.
Yep.
Or why we landed why you made the decisions you did on the back of the feedback that you had. So I think Councillor Bos is right. It can lead to people taking things out of context or not understanding the whole picture around the plan for the next 12 months.
I think also that the introduction, the CE and Mayor welcome could help with some of that. So depending on your.
So in the preamble, basically, with
It's actually on that introduction from the CEO and the Mayor. I've got a bit of an issue with that. I mean, the Mayor wasn't involved in this process, and I think the introduction should be from the Deputy and the CE, because she guided it, she was involved. Mr. Conley was away for the entire process. And the nice little photograph of him and the CE sitting at the front there, it kind of belies the reality of what the situation actually was. And I find it a little bit fraudulent, actually. They were presenting that to the community when actually was not the case. Now, we may have to legally do this, but personally, I have an issue with it. Others may share or not share that opinion, but I just wanted it out there that, sorry, Martin, but I just feel quite strongly about it.
I was away for 2 months.
Yes, you were. Probably most crucial to
I certainly pick up on what you're saying too, Boz, because the whole process was really managed by,
yes,
to a large extent, and she should be captured in here.
yeah, absolutely, she's not.
In the body of the document, and I'd really support that.
Sorry,
I completely agree with you, Boz, too. Thank you. I think Melissa's been the one who's been guiding the council all year, and should be the person signing this.
Not quite sure what's involved in that, but
Just going back to that summary document here, I think you're right. I think it's really important that perhaps in the preamble from the CE and whoever alongside the CE in that report, then perhaps capture some of the things like you have done with some of the most important things that we've actually managed to get through on this. And then people will read that as a summary to a large extent in here and then drill down on the detail. But I accept, yeah.
I sort of feel at the very least the deputy mayor's signature should be on the bottom. That's just my 2 cents in that. On page 2.
I'd like to see a photo with all 3 of them in there.
Yes, fair. Yeah, to be fair, yes.
I think this is obviously not a decision-making forum in terms of.
Oh, no, it's an observation, Colin.
Yeah, and I agree, but I'm not sure how we would amend that from here without by way of resolution.
It feels like now to charge the light brigade here.
Because if it comes up next week, for instance, when we endorse an enhanced annual plan, it could delay the process.
I just want to get that out of there.
Yeah, no, thank you, Martin. From a writing point of view, there's absolutely still time. I guess that's what we're here for today, to understand what your views are. This is a document for the year ahead in which the mayor is the mayor for. So yeah, that's another consideration.
Would the option of co-signing be something that would reflect the combined work that's all been done?
So just have Melissa involved in a photo shoot.
I'm inclined to agree with Woody, actually. I think the three, because of Melissa's involvement through this whole process.
It was a huge amount of work. There was
Absolutely.
no acknowledgement here of work that was put up.
Yeah.
Massive.
I think that, if we got acceptance of that, I mean, I'd certainly encourage that.
I think to address your issue of it being a meaty document, is you have to remember that most people tend to read these on electronic copies now, and the contents page can be linked so that you click on well, I'm only really interested in roading, so I'll click on that section and they go straight to it. So you have to remember that most people don't read printed out.
Well, back in my day, Charlie, we had a premium.
The odd few who are who that's their bag and all for them.
Could I just say something in support of what Boz has said? We have in the last 12 months made some significant changes to the governance structure within council. All the work in this document has gone through the strategy working group, of which Melissa has been the chair, with the exception of the final sign-off on those things. This document represents Melissa's guidance and leadership of our council over the last 12 months, if not longer, following on from some pretty turbulent resolutions that were passed by this council. I think it behoves us to follow through on what we've said we're doing, that Melissa is our leader. And Melissa has been seen by the community very clearly for the last long period of time as the de facto leader of our council. And she should be the one who signs this document. And what Alex, whilst I agree that this is for the next 12 months, this represents a significant portion of work that we have done over the last 3 or 4 months. And Martin, you said you've been away 2 months. That's 2 of the 3 months of which we've been working on this document. And quite frankly, while you've been here, you haven't actually provided any guidance. Melissa has done all the guidance. And so she deserves the recognition from us as a council for the work and leadership that she has shown. That's all I've got to say.
I mean, if there was a vote on it around this table right now, I think we'd find from Al, Woody, I think you're in agreement as well, but you know, I'm fairly sure the other councillors would agree as well.
I would like to see the blessing of obviously of councillors as well, but also from Mayor Martin about the acknowledgement of Melissa's contribution as well. And if we pick up on Woody's suggestion of having all three involved, and if we got endorsement from the Mayor and from Janice over that today, I'd be more than comfortable.
And it's going to co-signatory at the bottom.
Absolutely.
I actually personally think no matter what happened or has happened in council, every council should have the deputy mayor involved, because the deputy, the mayor and the CEO are the, I suppose, the most important, if for lack of a better word, people involved. So the deputy should always have a input into it and a bit of recognition.
A lot of deputies don't do the level of commitment that our deputy does, though, Woody.
So they're always there to step up, you know what I mean?
Well, they will step up to the mark event the mayor following. You know, I mean, I'd be comfortable even if we, I don't know Martin's view on it because he's not telling us at this stage.
I'll just few words from me, and then thank you everyone for your kind words about the effort that I put in during the consultation period. It's much appreciated. I think the acknowledgement has to always sit here that we have, that this is and would always ordinarily be a mayor and chief executive welcome. We have an elected mayor, it's Martin, and whilst in this situation he was away for a large portion of the consultation and the forming of the consultation we put out, he is still the elected mayor. And so whilst I would be comfortable taking up the suggestion of a shared approach, I think we need to recognise that given that Martin is elected mayor, there definitely is a strong argument for his position in this. Welcome to the document. So.
But we're not suggesting we remove the mayor, but we're suggesting that you go as mayor.
Yeah, I think this should be added to it.
Without wanting to speak out of term, of course, one solution that you may want to consider is to collectively have the message as a whole of council. You've worked on it all together in various capacities, various times, and you may just want it to be from the council as a whole and the chief executive. Throw it out there just to try and address all of your various concerns.
And that is true. I mean, all of the councillors put a huge amount of work, both in the formation of the consultation document and during the consultation period. There were lots of extra days of work and interaction and engagement. So I think that's actually a very fair recommendation or considered approach.
I'd like to see it looked at, little saying.
So do you want us to amend it to welcome from your council and chief executive and have it from all of you?
Yeah, that does worry me. As long, yeah. Look, I mean, we're actually further. There's a photograph of everybody by the very beginning there, already there. So I don't think we need to have another one. I think, but in terms of this seems like an official welcome to this document. Don't allow, and it's like a nice little happy family photograph on the front there. It's just like, not the reality, but also B, it's just like there's no consideration. There's not even any acknowledgement into the process that was guided through. Not a thanks or anything for that. There's taking a lot of credit for it, and that's just not the reality of the situation. I don't think this is accurately reflects what happened. So if it's a photograph of Melissa and yourself and Mr. Connolly and a signature from the three of them, I'm happy with that.
Okay, you can do that.
But I don't want to put Melissa in a tight spot, and I feel like I may have just done that. Melissa, I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. I just wanted to let my feelings be.
I would support Melissa's recommendation. Yeah, absolutely.
So your thoughts?
I'm more than happy.
Got to do my hair again and go and have another photo.
This is to the whole game that's, I think, unfortunately.
We can do that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, excellent. Where are we up to?
Page 2.
What page is that? I went under. Financial snapshot. Financial, I've got something to say about financial snapshots in my notes. Can I go first? Is that all right?
Go on.
It's probably for Alex, you might want to amend something. So up the top there, it says capital spend 28.1 million. In the paragraph below it, it says 29.1 million. Which one is it?
We're working through all the figures. This is to show you the look and feel of.
Where is it?
And yeah.
Yes, so some of the other ones there don't all sort of equal each other too on the photographs. So if you haven't done the final figures, that might be why. There might be the odd rounding thing too, whether they're not.
Rounding can be there. Yeah.
The problem is with the finances, of course, is that's still being worked on as we speak.
Yes, yeah.
The diagrammatical representations of the finer details is yet to be populated.
So, so with the meeting next Wednesday, is likely, when is it likely that we'll get the final documents?
Fully late Friday.
Yeah, late Friday.
Day.
Weekend reading.
We are.
No, it's just, you know, given that these numbers aren't at this point set, it would just be nice to know that there is time to, like, a considerable amount of time to check those numbers.
We made a lot of progress on them yesterday. And so tomorrow and Friday, the aim is to get them done. I would really love to sleep this weekend. So.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Sleep's overrated, Joe.
So those numbers will be amended next.
By the final.
Absolutely. Yeah. So over onto key facts. They won't necessarily look like this, but it's a refresh of just outlining what council provides in a
The graphic
one pager.
of it.
So do I.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
Can you spread it out across the page though, just that rather than have it condensed into a little box like?
Oh yeah, this won't be what you see next.
Yeah, no, good.
And then we're into probably page 10. We've got our district, just a snapshot of South Wairarapa. And then we get into, similar to last year, what is an annual plan? These graphics will be amended. Then we go into the enhanced nature of the plan, why we're doing this instead of a long-term plan. Over into
Can I just raise one sort of small question? For those who do read the printed version, or indeed click on a link and come to the page that starts with an enhanced annual plan, that they may actually ask the question, so what is enhanced about this annual plan compared to any other annual plan? Is it possible to put a 1 or 2 sentence explanation of the?
Certainly, essentially, it's just a case of making sure that you include what your activities are and a reminder of what and why those significant activities are done. And there's a little bit more in the, so you need to include a funding impact statement for each activity, whereas you wouldn't necessarily have to do that in an annual.
And all of the capital details.
Because of details by growth, investment. Or renewal.
In terms of those categories.
So I can just provide a paragraph for that. Yeah.
and I think
And you said nicely with the legislation having been passed on the.
Yes.
Sense of what does that legislation do to get planned? Yeah.
and then a section on what's changed since the long-term plan was
Adopted.
adopted.
4 years ago. A lot's changed. So we won't yet go into too much detail there. It's similar to what we've included in the consultation document. We've got a section on rates and changes to how rates are calculated. So that's something finance have helped put together. And then into the consultation outcomes, which is quite a significant part of the document. It's to the reports that went through at deliberations. And that's the real bones of the introduction. So Colin, I think what you were talking about, it's not a huge part. And
No, you're absolutely right. No, it's it does summarise effectively where we're, which is.
Is there anyway, and this is just an idea on the spot, so no, there's not. When you formatted the consultation document, there was kind of the important information on the sides, or like a did you know, or the question. Would it be possible for these first pages to format it in a similar fashion that could pull out like a few key
highlights,
like a bit of a highlight and a bit of a kind of arrow to the really key things, or are we still in that same sort of grey space about?
Yeah, you're probably run the risk of looking like you're trying to direct things towards a positive or one page rather and deflecting away from some other information.
Yeah, I think rather than, I certainly would want to be cherry picking.
No.
The detail.
No, it's just
overview.
the formatting of that consultation document. It did allow for those of us who are just looking kind of for highlights and for those who want to read all the details just in the way it was formatted. So I was just wondering if we could have kind of address both, but.
Charlie's got all that under control with pushing a button and you go onto road and where you go.
I think
It's the challenge of either taking a reader through for gradual absorption of all the factors at play versus having highlights and overestimating the focus on some things and missing opportunity of explanation on others. So you've got that.
Is there, and it sort of, I guess, addressing the point that Colin made early on, that for a lot of people, and I'd probably argue that for most people, they wouldn't read the annual report by choice. Like, 90% of our community members aren't going to think, what shall I do on my Sunday afternoon? I know I'll pick up the annual plan and I'll give it a read. Is it then possible to take a similar approach that we took through consultation, where kind of the key aspects were pulled out and we did the vlogs and things? Is it possible to log some of this so that, again, some of those key aspects, not cherry picked or the positive, but just kind of the key aspects of this are shared in a different format, which may appeal to a broader.
Yeah, absolutely. We're already working with Aidan to do something on roading. So I think, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, just
introduce the document.
Generally understood that council documents aren't particularly user-friendly. And if we can find other ways of sharing the important information that this document does actually contain, then whether that's, snippets on Facebook or on the website, or if it's vlogs, just becomes, maybe a bit more easily accessible.
I think this is an ongoing process of making our documents more user-friendly as well as presenting information.
Yeah, and I think we've, even in the last 18 or so months, I think we've come a really long way. But now I think it's about how we continue to share.
We've got an LTP to develop over the next 12 months. So that's 6 months, yeah, true. I'm not here for 2 days, but so things like lists of bullet points, how can we present that slightly different in the LTP? Might be an improvement. We can add on to the improvements we've already made.
LTP was something.
Emojis.
LTP was something.
Oh, geez.
Third ones for some of them, little happy balloons for other ones.
LTP was something that we talked about in the CEO interview. So you need to know that come the 27th, we'll be now working heavily in LTP. So don't be thinking come 26, but it's like job done. We're all relaxed.
I'll give them the 27th and the 28th off.
Oh, that's
Start on the
kind of
first.
you. That's very kind of you.
So we start on the 1st of July. For the
Yes, one of those is a public holiday. It's very good.
So this, LPPs and annual plans are really good opportunities to experiment in the way that we communicate with our public. Because one of the things that I've been concerned about for some time is the lack. We try our very best to capture as many as in our community to give us the feedback as possible, but we often miss the silent majority out there, for instance, who aren't forthcoming in having their say. So there's an opportunity here,
And I think
to experiment with various ways and means of actually getting them involved to some
I
extent.
think Lisa said, it was coming back from Mary, Lisa said to Boz and I, one of her hot tips for that was don't just talk to your community when you're doing an
Yeah.
neighbourhood.
Yeah.
You know, find other times and ways to talk to them so that that actually becomes a far more natural conversation rather than, right, we need your input on this really meaty document. Tell us what you think. So, you know, it's been at some of the other fairs and festivals and stuff that are going on.
So thinking about that, I mean, we're all an integral part of our community. We feel that we are in touch with our community with what we do in terms of outside council stuff as well. And maybe we need to start refocusing on those groups as well. And when you're talking to individuals, you know, they all know you're a councillor. So say we've got long-term plan coming up, you know, let's see how we can best communicate the message back to you people.
I think the advice from Lisa was more like council as an organisation, have that two-way conversation more than individual councillors.
Yeah.
Individually, each of the council staff are all integral parts of the
Sure.
community, but we're probably as an organisation only seen to engage when there's kind of something meaty to engage.
So just a quick question in terms of consultation, because once again, it's something that we do or live and breathe on a regular basis, is the involvement that we actually have with community boards around consulting, because sometimes the message is somewhat distorted between we having the conversation and being heavily involved in the conversation and what we feed to community boards and what community boards feed out. And the message can often get distorted, and that worries me a little bit about, and certainly with LTP coming. So I think it's probably a conversation that we need to have about how we work with communities.
Better enable them.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with that kind is that sometimes the community boards take on an adversarial role.
Correct.
Against council, and I think trying to get them to
I was going to say that, but I wasn't actually quite that brave.
Yeah, and I just think sometimes they see their role as being the adversaries are adversaries rather than taking a collegial approach to some of these things. Could be, I would think, problematic.
Yeah. So I think that's the conversation that we need to have as we move into that phase. I think it's really important we do.
Yeah. I'd sort of be inclined, you know, we can spend a huge amount of time and effort working on different strategies to get community engagement. But the simple reality is, and we're no different than any other council or any other government around the world, people get engaged when they want to, not because we put out a particular document, that they will get engaged where something piques them, whether it be a pothole outside their front door or a leak. If it doesn't leak, they go, okay, it's a tax. I've got no choice. I've got to pay it. So, you know, and I go back to when we had a massive engagement, which was because we actually engaged about something that the community was really involved in, and that was the sports fields and the park and the gym. And that's where you get massive involvement, because people are actually actively invested in those issues. But quite frankly, most people aren't actually invested in what happens when they flush their toilet. So long as it goes away. You know, but that's the reality. You know, there are people who become really, really engaged, and we see those from people who turn up to our council meetings time and time again. But they are absolutely very much the minority in our community. And, you know, if we get 3, 4, 5% engagement, you you know, we did a fantastic engagement this year with our community and we were out and about, but we still only got less than 2% of people responding, despite having meetings all over the community. And, you know, we all went to numerous meetings. If it's not sexy and it's not something that really motivates somebody because they're driving through a pothole or they've got sewage running down the street, they won't get engaged, because actually they vote people like us, muggins around the table, to try and make decisions on their behalf with all the information that we can get. And they vote us in because they expect us to make the decisions on their behalf and make the best decisions possible. You know, we could spend hours and hours talking about engagement processes, but it won't make any difference. People will get engaged when they want to, not when we tell them they need to.
Moving on.
Moving on.
There we go.
So part 2, the significant activities.
Sorry, before we go to that, could I just ask the other deliberation outcomes? Where did we end up with WEDs and those shared services things, given what Masterton has done? What was the final outcome of that? Because we voted to keep our contribution, but that will mean we'd be subsidising Masterton if they go ahead. So where have we ended up on that?
To my knowledge, there is only one shared service role that was impacted by the decision through Masterton in the end. And at the moment, Carterton and ourselves have agreed that we will hold that one for the next 12 months and bring it back to the table as part of our discussions with you. We're talking about $10,000 max, so it's not huge in terms of any rate impact or decision making. But it's a bit too late to start thinking about how we might move that. But Masterton have withdrawn from that particular role. Cycling, and it's a tiny amount of hours. So to give us time, the 2 councils, to decide what we want to do with that. Tentatively, Jeff and I have agreed that we would just pick that up between us and we'd bring it back to the table as part of the LTP.
What does that mean for the employees of that organisation?
They say they're employed by Carterton, so it's just the funding would come to us and Carterton rather than Masterton.
And we've already started rescoping the current position that was merged as a result of that agreement to clearly define the outcomes that we're expecting over the next 12 months. What is it that, what's the other one?
No,
There were 3 that there was positive age,
they retained
trails and walking and cycling.
Yes, so the positive ageing was retained,
Yes.
and that was the big chunk of the money. I believe, but I'm not sure that the WEB's money went to contestable 20%, but I'm not totally sure.
Masterton, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
We had a couple of other funding things too, though, that we said we would fund it as long as the other councils agreed to. Did they all come through?
We're still working on those. We're waiting.
Go resilient.
Yeah.
They did.
So for water resilience programme, we're all on board. So that one goes ahead. 5 Towns Trails Trust is uncertain at the moment. Masterton put it into the contestable fund. Carterton are funding it. I'm not clear on Greater Wellington at this point.
So only 2, was it? Or was there a third one?
No, there were just those 2.
I think you're thinking of destination wildlife, but what it was.
Oh, that was the one.
Yeah, but we
Agreed to do it.
we in our consultation document that the WED's destination Wairarapa, business Wairarapa and those positions, they were never part of our consultation. They were only ever part of Masterton's. So if we were looking to look at what we wanted to look at those, it would be the future. Yes.
And I believe our agreements were already covering this annual plan.
Agreed.
Because they put them into the LTP, they were looking at year 2 and 3 and onwards and how they operated. So our discussion will come when we move to LTP conversations, and we'll pick up Masterton and Carterton, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't put us in the position we were in waiting for somebody else's deliberations. We have to talk collaboratively about those and all agree that we're going to do the same process. As having one out of step with the other two is not being helpful.
No.
But our funding for Destination Wairarapa, WEDS and Business Wairarapa are intact for 24-25.
Thanks.
So these next sections are pretty standard. It's sort of numbers that change. There's still columns to be added by finance. So it goes through each significant activity. The exception this year is that there is the addition of the community wellbeings and why we do this activity as part of the enhanced factor. So that's at the end of each group of significant activities. I don't know if we need to go through these in any more detail than.
I think we just need to note that the performance targets have all come over from the LTP. So when we were starting the process looking at the long-term plan, we wanted to refresh all of the KPIs because there's a lot of them.
Some of them aren't very new.
Some of them are not fit for purpose, but because we went to enhanced annual plan, we have to bring the year 4 KPIs over. So that's why you will see that there's not been any changes made when you compare it to where the LTP was. So we've had to continue to bring those across. But we will be refreshing and going through them for the long-term plan. But we'd already started, and so we'll just pick that up on the 1st of July.
Yeah, thing to note as well is that we've had early indications from audits that they're starting to put more of an emphasis on non-tangible measures as well. Charlie and I.
So
Non-tangible, sorry,
Non-financial.
but I'm going to put up no say. Particularly climate change was called out, wasn't it, Charlie, as being one.
Yeah, that's
one area.
Audit New Zealand kindly sent us good feedback that they've had from learnings from councils that are LTP this year, which is very useful.
Another bonus for us.
So we'll be to make sure we capture those things that other councils had to catch up on in advance in our and of course there was the new standard last year, 48 for non-financial measures. So there is a little bit more than previous LTP's reliance on those measures.
Suffice to say, we'll be putting more emphasis in the LTP around our measures because the current ones aren't fit for purpose. And when we've got regulatory requirements made of council, then to have it as a KPI really doesn't make sense. If it's a regulatory requirement, you have to meet it full stop. So why have it as a KPI? There'll be a lot more thought put into it as part of the LTP.
And with a focus and the signalled increased focus on non-financial examination of those factors, it leads to the 4 wellbeings topic, which we've also done careful pre-work on that in terms of the spatial plan, so looking out and being prepared to see the importance of the wellbeings and the non-financial.
So then that leads into the financial statements, which again, I'm sorry about the lack of page numbers, are about 3/5 into the document. You'll find pages that look like this, which is the beginning of the financial statements after the water significant activities.
Part 3.
That's part 3, that's it.
Yeah, it was part 3 last time, so I don't know if it will be part 3 as such, but we'll have to. Oh no, that's right, part 3. I mean, not much said about financial statements. I love them, not many other people want to read them. They are the standard prospective financial statements, again, because we're doing an enhanced and you're doing a comparison year of LTP year 4. And then we also have prior year, that was a requirement of the water reform. That's another one of the enhanced parts of the annual plan, is that we have the prior year comparison on there. Most annual plans you just budget. These figures are all being rechecked, so that's why we haven't put them in for most of it. And actually the P&L, we found a few things that were classified incorrectly in there, so there'll be a little bit of movement in that P&L figures. Capital one though, we've checked and rechecked it, so it's actually 28.1, so we will change that sentence. And where we referred to earlier on the enhanced requirement over capital spend, that is requiring you to classify your spend by growth, improvement, level of service, or renewals. So that's why we've split that there. I'm quite proud of that capital statement. One thing, then we have the funding impact statement for whole council. Accounting policies, which I am just checking a lot of the yellow highlighted stuff, whether it's speaking. I'm sure none of you are going to sit up late at night reading accounting policies. We have our financial benchmarks, which again, because we're doing an enhanced annual plan, you use the year for LTP benchmark for rates increases like that. So signalling straight up that we are not meeting those two rates increases benchmarks from year 4. And that, as we know, is because we're in a different world to 4 years ago in terms of inflation and costs and infrastructure requirements. But we are still meeting our balanced budget, which is that you are funding your activities. And that to me is the most important one, really is, to show that council is being financially prudent. Just descriptions of the benchmarks and our assumptions that we've made. Some of these are easier when you're doing an annual plan because, for example, your population growth or your rating unit growth assumption, you don't need to rely on the predicted rating unit growth. You take the one from the last week before you adopt the rates, so you know exactly how many rating units you've got. So I've changed that from medium risk to low. So. And put in a bit about the insurance inflation, where I talk about inflation rates. It's the only real changes from the TP attributions. After this section will be what's called the funding impact statement for rating. And that is essentially a description of your, shorter description of your rating model and policy. And with a table at the back that lists all of the rates individually. And that in conjunction with the rates resolution forms the basis of setting your rates that you do in July. So it will tell, the rates resolution will tell you exactly how much in total you want to get from your rates. You're planning to fund from your rates and exactly what each of those rates will be to the ratepayer. And because those figures are to the ratepayer, those are the ones where we include GST in those figures. And quite clearly at the top of the page, we say that. Right. So all other figures in the document are exclusive of GST in accordance with our accounting policies. And I believe so the fees and charges, we used to actually physically put them in the PDF of the document, but that doesn't allow you to make adjustments during the year very easily if you have inflationary costs. So now we provide a link to the fees and charges. There were 2 Was it all three that were missed off the document that you adopted 2 weeks ago? They're not new charges, they're just literally missed off the table. So we are going to include those in our resolutions next week. So if you're wondering, hang on, I thought we did fees and charges. That's why they were literally administratively missed off that. So you just need to resolve to adopt those fees and charges.
When you say they change, I thought the point of the setting of them was that they were now fixed for 12 months. Is that not?
The ones that you adopt, you can throughout the year change your fees and charges. Yep. For example, if your rubbish provider came back to you and said that your landfill fees are going to go up 100%, you have the ability to change those throughout the year. Yep. Including them in a physical table in the document made that very confusing for our community to. But hang on, it says this in one document and it says the other on the website.
And that includes things like liquor licensing charges.
So liquor licensing charges, if the legislation were to change, again, we would change that fee. And therefore the table, if we included it physically, would be out of date. So
okay.
It is normal practice to have your fees and charges as a separate document.
Right.
You wouldn't normally put it in either of your two documents, to be fair. Also being aware that, there are a couple of fees that you have to consult on before you can change them, but the rest generally you have the authority to change during the year if needs be. Like Charlie said, if there was a sudden increase in cost that meant that you needed to put that particular fee up, you could resolve to do so, in which case we would then refresh the fees and charges table on the website.
Thank you.
My apologies. Very important, expensive phone call.
we just finished.
See what happens.
Literally second year all day. Oh, you see, I just disappear and these things just pick up momentum.
Speed through. We're like, right, well, Colin's not here. Let's do some stuff.
Did you have a question, Colin?
No.
He's a large
We
bill.
just explained that there were two or three, I can't remember which fees and charges that were missed from the adoption.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to add those onto the resolution
Right.
next week, just so you're not shocked by.
They're current ones, they're not
Yeah.
new ones.
They're not new ones. So basically, the box was missed with the
Which ones were they? Which were they related?
removal of cars,
Oh, yeah.
and something else like that.
Like the bylaws one.
Yeah,
They were bylaws.
yeah.
Okay.
And of course, during the LTP is usually the opportunity where you consult on new fees and charges and things. So
LTP, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
so where we didn't have any significant any new fees and charges this year, LTP, you get the opportunity to consult on those.
Did we have any pushback with any of, because the fees and charges, I think, have only recently been published, have they not?
They would have been published in the.
We needed a dog
We needed
license.
the dog licensing.
The dog,
Yeah,
that's right.
that was our main one we worked on. Yeah.
So there was no pushback anywhere.
They only process on Monday, I think. So.
Yeah, fair enough.
So you content with the way this is shaping up?
Yeah, my question is, so are you able to give any indication of kind of the final look in terms of the pictures that are in, are they sort of set? Design wise, will it change much, or kind of what we've got is what we've?
So the next week it will be, you will have a Word document. It will be going to design once it's finalised, hopefully by the end of the week. You might have a few pages depending on the availability of the designers.
So when we get it next,
pages.
when we get it next week, it still won't have its final design.
No, there's not enough time and we don't want to get it to them until everything is done. So no, unfortunately.
There is a resolution next week for minor grammatical changes in design,
But it will be, obviously the final version within a month of adoption. But it'll be a lot more nicely formatted than what you're seeing today.
That month isn't just a figure that we've come up with, it's actually something that's allowed
That's
to actually produce that final document.
Just to recap, we're going to amend the welcome to be from the 3 others, do the new picture. We are going to check the graphs and tables and make sure all our numbers line up. I did write at the side of here that maybe we should take, like we did in the consultation document, where we move the key to the side with the values. Would be good for these to mirror the same as the consultation document, maybe, in terms of look. So we do the same. We are going to put an extra paragraph in the enhanced annual plan to reflect what is enhanced into a normal annual plan to cover that one off. And that was it, I think, in terms of front introduction. And I've not heard anything else that you are concerned about. And we will then put the additional recommendations for the soups into the remission policy based on the feedback that we've heard. If I missed anything in terms of what you think you've asked of us today?
I'm conscious that we do have a few people away today, and I am conscious that when we've looked at documents previously, sometimes there are people who are very kind of detailed on the exact word that has been used. I wonder if we just pop out an email with like a final call, if you've got any specific particular wordsmithing that you want to do this document, it has to be by Thursday or whatever the cutoff day or whatever the cutoff is, so that we don't perhaps come to next week and then suddenly have like, oh, you've said negative, but we prefer the word something else. Reduced, or that the word negative is too negative. And to make it smooth that process.
So if I was to just put out an email to say these are the things that we agreed to review for adoption next week. If you've got any other particular sentences that cause you concern or use of words that cause concern, we need to know by end of day.
Thanks, Ben.
Looking at me, I've said my piece already.
No, I think it just gives those that aren't in the room or for whatever reason, just that final chance to say, I'm a bit uncomfortable with what.
Okay.
It's good.
We're done.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Jeez, I can't believe it.
Anything missed? You're comfortable?
explain the process afterwards is that once the rates are set, just so that you guys know a little bit more about how it works. So once the rates resolution comes out, those are our rates that get locked in. We get our final property changes next week, subdivisions, revaluation, objections from revaluations and things like that. And those are the figures that our rates team, Kirsty, the local Kirsty, loads up into the system, and that is what the notices, the instalments are based on. The very first instalment people get of the year includes the rates resolutions from both South Wairarapa and Greater Wellington. And obviously, the rates assessment on there. So people get the opportunity to check that their property has been rated correctly. So what's this, 15 dwellings? I've only got it. So that's another reminder to people. Every rates notice that we send out to people has their valuations and the nature of their improvements that are on their property. So if people have queries about those, they are more than welcome to call up the rates team. But it's mostly through QV, and that is
Talk to them nicely.
Talk to them very nicely. But QV on their website, it's actually really easy to correct property details on there. The only one that is a bit more involved is that revaluation process, which is a 3-yearly process unless you've got a building consent or something that's changed in your property or you subdivide. We get those weeks.
Do we have any indication of how many challenges there have been to valuations?
There were 83 the last time I heard. I've approved roughly half of those. So I'm still waiting for a few more. There weren't any dramatic changes that were unsurprising. So there was one property that doubled its value, but there was very solid reasoning for that in terms of there had been development on that property since today. So yeah.
Thanks, Charlie.
That's roughly consistent with what we had the last valuation as well.
You've worked hard on this, Charlie. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think it's actually been, quite a process, isn't it?
Just let you know, I will not be letting you know my mobile number while I'm in the UK.
Oh, I thought I already had it.
Like weekly emails with photographs and updates.
Just don't send us any restaurants to buy.
Yeah, don't do that though. Okay.
Janice, can I just raise something outside
Yeah.
us than your plan?
When we will push it off the
Oh,
line.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah, okay.
Finishing off workshop and then we've got some.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's like the one take all day. Thank
Hey,
you.
So are we still on? I can't see anyone.